Hey guys, welcome to the Blue Deck Podcast. I am your host, Joseph Mazrak. The first 5 episodes of this podcast, this is the 5th, are dropping all at once, so starting next episode, I'll be able to respond to comments and hopefully be a bit more interactive with the audience. Also, next episode, we will be giving you a layout of what to expect from the Blue Deck going forward. Quick preview. We're planning to break up my story into the Attic of the World into seasons. So be sure to hit that subscribe button so you won't miss an episode as the Blue Deck Podcast becomes a weekly show. One final note, next episode will be your last chance to review the show before our first giveaway, so head over to iTunes. I really appreciate it. Now for our recap.
Piled onto the captain's abandoned raft, Charles and his friends stare down at a door set into the planks. A secret compartment, Charles thinks. But as he cautiously opens the cubby, he is not met by a small compartment for stowing trinkets, rather an entire basement. To be clear, the basement is a physical impossibility. First of all, it's far too big to hide under the little boat. Second, as they lean out over the water to peer below the raft, they see nothing beneath them but water, sand, and weeds. Third, the interior of the lower cabin is made of more logs, like a log cabin out in the woods. No way it's watertight. In the cabin, they spy Captain Kidd, looking up at them as he sprawls in his hammock hung between a pair of bookcases. What's more, the captain is not alone. In a dark corner of the room sits the most menacing cowboy. A hat hides his face. His coat is worn and dusty, and the points of his black boots cut hard triangular shapes into the line of sunlight falling at his feet. Also, he's carrying a rifle. Here sits the reason the Patch Fairy's gone missing. She's been kidnapped. Charles believes this, but he is wrong. The fairy was kidnapped, true, but not by the cowboy. The shadowy stranger folds open his duster to reveal a metal star pinned to his shirt. He is a U.S. Marshal, presumably one of the good guys, and he and the captain are planning a rescue mission. That is when this cowboy, Marshal Rabin, notices Charles and his friends know nothing of what he calls the decks. What are these decks? Charles doesn't know. Evidently, they're important to the cowboy because, peering over at Captain Kidd, he rumbles, "Are you going to explain it, or should I?"
And now, into the Attic of the World, Chapter 5, The Reality Decks. Captain Kidd got to his feet. After gathering up the hammock into his arms, he deposited the bundle into a basket on the floor. Then he donned a white captain's cap, twisted a wooden peg on the wall, and folded a long tray table down between the shelves where his bed had been. He looked to William. "Hand me that chair, would you?" William found a metal folding chair tucked behind the ladder. He handed it over, and the cowboy marshal offered the captain 2 packs of playing cards from a coat pocket. When Captain Kidd was seated at the table, he slid the cards from their boxes and lined the decks neatly side by side. He turned, looking each of us in the eye. His mood had changed, not as weary as before, not as angry either, but he was still very serious. Whatever he was going to show us, he only wanted to do it once. He turned again to the table, his youthful hand settling over the cards, one stack blue, the other red. His thumbs fanned through the decks, seeming as familiar with playing cards as my dad, who was my family's all-time shuffler. As the captain's thumbs lifted the neighboring corners of the decks, the opposing pressure of his hands drove the cards down again in rapid patter against the tabletop. Gradually, he moved the corners of the decks together, the red and blue cards just barely missing, then brushing together as he fanned them, and finally falling with overlapping edges. With the corners of the cards interlaced, he adjusted his grip, then delicately moved the stacks together, so no more than their white borders touched. He lowered his head to examine the gently steepled stacks. Satisfied, his mood brightened a bit more. "Reality," he began, "is like two decks of cards shuffled together. They meet ever so slightly in the middle. There's a red side and a blue side, and they have layers." His voice had the rare quality of a teacher who marvels over a favorite subject. "See there, the little gaps between the cards? Where the decks met, cards from one stack made spaces in the other. Reality is like that, gaps between the layers, but they touch." Captain Kidd was in his element, the way his voice smoothed into a calm, concentrated whisper and his expression softened. It seemed as if talking about the cards was therapeutic to him. His fingers moved over the decks with such care. "We're right about here, I'd say." Squeezing the pad of his finger down with his thumb, he was able to point with just his fingernail. Our eyes were directed to a card very near the top of the blue deck. He met my eyes. "Understand?" he asked. I nodded. He looked at me long enough to make me uncomfortable, but when he was satisfied, his eyes moved on to my friends. They also nodded. The captain looked at the cards again. "It's possible to move between the layers, but you have to be in the middle where the cards meet. Another thing to consider, reality has its own kind of physics. Easier to go down a deck than up. That's called reality gravity." Once more, his eyes checked to make sure we were keeping up. We were. Don looked around the cabin. "Is this room in our world or yours or somewhere else? I don't understand how a door in a little raft opens up to this place. Are we on another card? Like another layer of reality?" "Not really," the kid said. The marshal's gruff, rumbling voice offered a more complete answer. "This is magic. Like the captain said, it's a trick. If reality is divvied up into thin slices like a deck of cards, this room is in the empty space between the layers." We all looked at him. "This place is unusual magic." Marshal Rabin said this with a measure of reverence. Don's attention returned to Captain Kidd's folding table. She was looking at the two decks, one side red, the other blue. "Where do you think the Patch Fairy is?" The captain's lips pulled to one side. Maybe one level up?" William locked his arms across his chest. "What happened to her? How do you know she's kidnapped?" The captain eyed the adult in the room. Marshal Rabin propped his rifle against the wall and leaned forward with his elbows on his knees. "I'd heard talk the kids were getting their patches, but thought nothing of it till someone found the fairy's cart abandoned. It was left outside one of those Victorian houses in old New Orleans. When I got there, I knew something was wrong because her wagon was already turning to dust." A smile tugged the corner of Don's mouth. "Fairy dust?" she asked. "Sounds funny to you, I guess." The marshal took a labored breath. "What I found there, 'tweren't nothing funny about that." He leaned back in the rocking chair, the soles of his boots scuffing against the dry planks, his coat open, revealing the worn grips of revolvers, one at each hip. I wondered what other sorts of armaments he was carrying, maybe a sawed-off shotgun or dynamite. Even though he was a marshal, presumably a good guy, intimidation rolled off him like smoke from a burning tire. As he spoke, I could hear the wiry whiskers along his lower jaw scratching the raised collar of his duster. "The neighbors said the house was rented to a little girl, no parents, and the day before the cart arrived, the girl invited them over for a recital. Apparently she'd learned to play something special on the piano, something by Frédéric Chopin. It was very pretty, they said." After listening to the cowboy's thunderstorm voice, Ozzie sounded like a squeaky 5-year-old. "That's why the Patch Fairy came? To give her a patch for learning a song?" The marshal sniffed. That's what I suspect. And the girl? Don asked. I'm getting to that. The marshal rocked in the chair, the heels of his boots pushing against the floor in creaking rhythm, no doubt timed perfectly to the second hand of his pocket watch. It made me feel dizzy, he growled. I knocked on the door, but no one answered, so I picked the lock and went inside. The house was dark. I flipped the switch, but nothing. Either the breaker was tripped or she hadn't paid her bill. Up until this point, I had pictured the story taking place in another world before electricity. He'd said New Orleans, but I didn't think he was talking about our version of the city. No one in our world rented houses to kids without parents. At least, I didn't think so. His rusty eyes flickered darkly. In one of the bedrooms, the one the look lived in, the bed was all a shambles. Beneath a pillow I found a looped cable. It ran down the bed to a heavy spring and a foot pedal. To the left of me, Dawn's hand rose to her mouth. William gave voice to her fears. It was a trap, for when the fairy gave her a patch. The dusty cowboy stroked his mustache. Yeah. I got the feeling that he was leaving something out, like the blood he'd found on the cable. Then it was the captain's turn to speak. The Patch Fairy's more than just a fairy. She's a daughter of the king of the Blue Realms. She's a princess, Don said. Yes, Captain Kidd sat as tall as he was able. I have to find her, to free her if I can, William asked. Can we help? Captain Kidd smiled. You're brave. I was hoping you would ask that. I shook my head. No offense, but we're just kids. We can't save a princess. I gestured to the gunslinger in the rocking chair. He, with his hard features and years of experience, not to mention all of his weapons. Take him. He can do it easily. Captain Kidd and the marshal exchanged looks. The marshal said, I would, maybe, but I can't. Outside of my jurisdiction, I'm a U.S. Marshal, and up there, he motioned with his thumb, that ain't America. No version of it. I don't go there. The captain looked at me. It's not for grown-ups anyway. Why not? I asked. Just isn't. Captain Kidd gestured to the marshal. He'll go left into the red deck. We'll go up. Why not down? Ozzie asked. You said down is easier. I came from down. So did Marshal Rabin. I asked. What if she went up again, and again, all the way to the top? No, the captain said with confidence. Not that far. Trust me, one level's high enough. He adjusted his hat. But you should know, monsters live in the attic of the world. Great things too, but even they are dangerous. The great things didn't concern me, but monsters? What kind of monsters? I asked. The marshal answered. Spiders with faces. Dead kings of darkness, the terrible black unicorn nightmare with all of his minions. He dusted off his pants. I should be off. He stood, towering over us. I'll leave you the rifle. If I happen upon her trail, I'll send the hawk. You know where to find the upward-facing door? It's close, the captain said, but my compass is going nuts. He took a brass compass from his pocket and handed it to Marshal Rabin. The marshal examined it. Beneath the glass, the little red needle was bouncing, first one direction, then another. When he shook it, the needle spun circles. Where's the button to select the door you want? Captain Kidd grinned like a boy caught doing something funny but wrong. It broke off. The marshal raised an eyebrow, handing it back. You should get that fixed. I will. It levels off when I'm closer to the mark. The grizzly cowboy scratched beneath his chin, eyeing me and my compatriots. Then to the captain he said, You sure about these little ones? They're awful green. They'll do, the captain assured him. Marshal Rabin propped his hands on his pistol grips. I reckon I could show you to the shuttle. It's a booger to find with no guide and a busted compass. When do you plan on setting off? Right now, the captain said. I scoffed. Now, what will we tell our parents? I hope you won't tell him anything. Captain Kidd shouldered a backpack that looked like something a soldier would carry into war, except no ordinary soldier and no ordinary war either. It was army green canvas bulging with pockets, but the shoulder straps were leather decorated with beads and dangling shark teeth. We can't just leave, I said. When will we get back? Then Don asked, What about Layla? She'll want to come. Captain Kidd shrugged. Layla isn't here. Sorry, I called, but she didn't answer. What's that supposed to mean? Don was close to tears. I can't explain it, he said. You found me, she didn't. It's not her fault, she's probably too young. The marshal stepped between Don and I. "Trust the captain. No one knows the decks better than him." With that, the old cowboy climbed the ladder, disappearing with a flourish of his coat out the open hatch. We followed, although, if we knew what we were getting into, Layla wouldn't have been the only one to stay home.